Now, there's long since been this belief out there that The Mandalorian will be exploring the origins of the First Order, and it stems mainly from an exchange between Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau during an interview they did last year and before Season 1 even aired, where they talk about how the New Republic didn't or couldn't just spring up overnight and bring peace to the whole galaxy after the fall of the Empire. And that when Episode 7 starts, it's clear the First Order is very well established and equipped and hasn't just materialized out of nowhere, even though, according to a new book called The Star Wars Book, their leader, Snoke, did pretty much materialize out of nothing, or was just somehow magically created by Palpatine after he had returned from the dead. But before we get more into that, more into Snoke's origin and a theory about it, let me just clarify that it's never been explicitly said that The Mandalorian will explore the origins of the First Order. Again, it's mainly been inferred since that one interview by Filoni and Favreau. And I know there are plenty of fans who hope it doesn't, who want to see the show be its own thing and not act as a sort of stepping stone to the sequel trilogy from the original trilogy, or something that tries to clean up its mess or tries to make sense of it all here after the fact. In other words, a lot of fans don't think it should be the goal or responsibility of The Mandalorian to make the sequels more palatable, which I do agree with. Though that said, and especially considering we're dealing with some of the remnants of the Empire in this show, certainly there can and will be some connections to the sequel trilogy and the First Order in particular. And if you're Disney and or Lucasfilm, and you have these three movies that a sizable portion of your fan base isn't all too fond of, yet you were hoping would end up being eternal cash cows, or that would always sell merchandise or lure people to Galaxy's Edge, which is based off of them, you're probably going to want to do something to start to change some hearts and minds about them, especially when you look at what a show like The Clone Wars did for the prequels, how it enhanced those films and made some fans love them even more, while helping others just come around to them and learn to appreciate them at all. Not to mention they spawned a whole new sub-generation of fans who literally grew up with the show and who then went on to get into all things Star Wars and especially into the prequel movies. And so going back to Snoke now, I think it's safe to say that learning more about him has been rather disappointing. In fact, after The Force Awakens, the second biggest question or mystery I think people were left with, after Who Are Rey's Parents, is what's the deal with Snoke? Where does he come from? What does he want? How did he corrupt Ben Solo, as implied by Leia? And so on. And after being told our Snoke theories suck by Rian Johnson, he just cut him in half and didn't even bother to give him any sort of explanation. Which then basically left it up to J.J. Abrams to give us his Snoke theory, or maybe his backup one, since I do think he had a different idea for him originally, or at least I hope he did. Anyway, he just basically told us, or showed us, that Snoke had never been anything more than a pawn or puppet of Palpatine's, and that apparently you can buy them or make them in bulk, since he had a whole vat of Snokes on Exegol. And now since that movie, or in this upcoming book, we'll learn that Snoke is actually something called a genetic strand cast, that he was indeed created by Palpatine and used or made to be his proxy, that Snoke himself likely didn't even know exactly who or what he is or where he came from, that he had free will but was basically controlled by Sidious. And though that leads to all sorts of fun questions, one of the biggest ones has to be, how do you just make a super powerful Force user like that? How do you just make a Snoke, or multiple Snokes even, though I'm guessing the ones in the vat were failed versions or prototypes or who knows what. Anyway, however he was made, you would think some type of template or DNA would be needed, that you couldn't just summon something like Snoke out of thin air, or even imbue some sort of host body with dark side power just because you tried really, really hard. Then again, they made a new body for Palpatine and brought his spirit back from the dead, so I guess anything is possible. And so likely it'll turn out, and you've probably long since figured out where I'm going with all this, it'll turn out Snoke wasn't just made from nothing, that there was indeed DNA used to create him, the DNA of the child, or Baby Yoda, or whatever it is you'd like to call him at this point until we get a real name. And yeah, I know a lot of you are really not going to like this idea, especially those of you who really want to see a separation between this show and the sequel trilogy. But come on, you know it to be true. You know they're going to do it. You know they're going to link the most popular character that's been created thus far in the Disney era of Star Wars, which again is Baby Yoda, I think without question. They're going to link him to the sequel trilogy somehow. I mean, we've already seen in the first season that the remnants of the Empire, or Moff Gideon in particular, wants Baby Yoda's genetic material for some reason, and I don't know about you, but Moff Gideon strikes me as the type of Imperial who would have remained loyal to his Emperor, and that would go on to be a founding member of the First Order, and would want to see his emperor return someday and bring stability back to the galaxy and all that good stuff. Furthermore, if I had to guess, I'd say that initially they want the child's genetic material because they think it can be used to create a new stable body for Palpatine to return to, because, thanks mainly to the novelization of The Rise of Skywalker, we know they're having or had trouble creating that. We know the body we see Palpatine in during the movie is basically falling apart, that it can't contain his great power. We even know that Rey is the granddaughter of a different body or version of Palpatine, a failed one that had no chance of containing his power. And why the granddaughter of a weak and failed clone of Palpatine can hold all his power, the power of all the Sith, it turns out, who can say? But leaving that alone for now, I think it'll turn out that even Baby Yoda's genetic material couldn't be used to create the perfect body for Palpatine. And so once they had Palpatine back in that body that was falling apart, they came up with a sort of interim plan, which was to make a sort of clone of Baby Yoda and to twist it to the dark side, and that Palpatine would then use this genetic strand cast, as it's called, to again rule by proxy till they could find a way to make him a new body, or he could get that whole situation sorted out. And yeah, I know some of you are probably coming up with all sorts of reasons why this doesn't make any sense or shouldn't even work, and are ready to take to the comments and lay them out for me. And not the least of which would be to ask, how do you clone Baby Yoda, who comes from a small species, yet end up with this huge, tall, twisted humanoid thing known as Snoke? And in response, I'll give you the same answer The Rise of Skywalker gave us as to how Palpatine came back. Dark science, cloning, secrets only the Sith knew. In other words, it just worked out that way, so please don't question it. But seriously, to quote the other sort of explanation we get in the film for Palpatine's return, the dark side is a pathway to many abilities, some considered to be unnatural. Which means it's possible that, yes, this is just how it all worked out, that the DNA of Baby Yoda got twisted when it was used, and that's that. Or, and this would be a better answer, I think, it was blended with the DNA of another, the DNA of some ancient and powerful Sith, perhaps, or maybe even the DNA of Darth Plagueis that Palpatine had laying around. Maybe he got a kick out of making his old master, in some respect, subservient to him now after his death. Either way, however it's done, I'm not going to be the least bit surprised when it happens, when they link Baby Yoda to Snoke. Again, the child is easily the most popular character the Disney era of Star Wars has created, which means you know they're going to use him any and every way they can, and even to try and salvage something from the sequels, perhaps. And please don't confuse me presenting the theory with loving it or endorsing it, though trying to be fair here, I don't think this is a horrible idea if done right, with the key there being if done right. I just think they've put all the pieces in place to do something like this, with how the remnants of the Empire seem so interested in Baby Yoda's genetic material, to how this new book left it very, very vague about just how Palpatine created Snoke, to knowing that, again, they likely want to slowly but surely try to make something out of the sequels to make them better, or just explain them better for the fans who really do not like them. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about all this. Do you think I'm crazy and dead wrong, that they won't do this, or can you actually see it? And how do you feel about it if it does happen? Do you want this show to start explaining things like Snoke or other mysteries from the sequel trilogy, or should they stay as far away from it all as they can? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.